Hi, kia ora, and welcome to the Creative Matters podcast, where we have really inspiring conversations with artists living in and from Aotearoa, New Zealand. I'm your host, Mandy Yarkich. Hello friends, thank you so much for joining me today. This week I'm speaking with Jeff Thomson. Jeff is a sculptor living in the little suburb of Helensville in the northwest of Tāmaki Makaurau Auckland. He is well known for his corrugated iron animals, birds, cars and people, as well as New Zealand icons like the Taihape, gumboot and the Holden in our National Museum Te Papa, and is often referred to as the corrugated iron man of Australasia. Unconventional, humorous, challenging, iconic and ironic, the sculpture of Jeff Thomson has given a whole new perspective to corrugated iron in the New Zealand landscape and in art. His work never stands still, and he continues to be recognised as one of New Zealand's leading and most original contemporary artists today. After a successful artistic career of over 40 years, Jeff has a lot of great stories, from making an elephant fence for James Wallace's home and sleeping rough in a rotunda in Albert Park for 9 days whilst installing iron elephants, to his early long-distance walks and meeting the locals, his first corrugated cowl made for a letterbox, and his love of finding a non-art audience. He talks about some of the domestic craft processes he has explored with iron, such as knitting, using down pipes for needles, French knitting, screen printing, weaving, lace making, and making pom-poms. He shares the ideas and techniques behind some of his artist-led community projects, public and private commissions, and other sculptures, and he talks about some of his favourite works. We discuss one of his career highlights, which he describes as functional art out in real life, roofing in the community, and the beautiful connections he's had with other respected New Zealand artists, such as Don Binney, Paul Dibble, Ralph Hortery, and Rosalie Gascoigne. This is a super fascinating glimpse into Jeff Thomson's incredible career. I feel like there are hundreds more stories we could be telling, and hopefully I'll get Jeff back at some point. Hello, Jeff.
Hello, Mandy.
It is really fantastic to have you here in the studio.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much for being on the Creative Matters podcast. I really appreciate it. And you've come down in the worst weather. It's so rainy and dismal outside.
Yeah, and you've got such a steep drive. My truck, even though I've got dual rear tyres, I didn't make it up and started to skid. So I had to go back down and, of course, park on the road and walk back up in the rain.
Yeah. Sorry about that. That is the one of the hazards of our very steep drive. But you got here, so that's good. And you've come down from Helensville, so that's only about 20 minutes from Muriwai, north of Muriwai, where I am. So what do you love about living in Helensville?
I like being slightly in the countryside. I've got all the facilities there, like people who do welding, sheet metal factory workshops, and mitre tins, and so I can get all my materials, and I'm close enough to the city to go in when I need to. Yeah. So that's what I enjoy. It's a good combination. It's a little bit more peaceful than when I've lived in big built up areas in the past.
Yeah. And you have an amazing studio, which is where you live as well, isn't it?
Yes, it's about 800 square meters covered. It's a double gable it's an old warehouse clad in corrugated iron, both the outside and the roof.
Which seems appropriate. Yeah. And you have a wife who obviously supports your practice, because I imagine there's corrugated iron objects and machinery and all sorts everywhere.
She has her moments. It's not necessarily easy living when there's a constant mess around, and it's not like working with paper where it's very easy to get rid of things like that, because I like to keep all my offcuts. And I do use them, but a lot of them I'll keep maybe for 7 or 8 years and eventually just throw them. But it's a matter of storage. So there's a constant flux of materials coming in and out.
Yeah, I can imagine. And quite big machinery.
Yep, I've tried to set up the studio like a plumber's workshop or a sheet metal workshop. So, I have lots of equipment and machinery.
I bet you do. And Shona's your wife, isn't she?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think I've met her a few times at gallery openings. Yeah. So what a great life you lead out in the northwest.
Yes, it's now been 1996. Came up from Dunedin where I was really fortunate, and for 95 I did the Francis Hodgkins Fellowship at the University of Otago, and came back to Helensville, and came up to Helensville for the first time because my parents lived out near Kalkopakoppa.
Okay.
And my mother had died at the end of 95, and I thought I've been travelling for so much, travelling with work around New Zealand and also overseas, and I sort of realised that I hadn't spent a lot of time with my father or my parents, so I came up here to be closer to him.
Oh, that's nice. And you've been there ever since?
Been there ever since.
Amazing. It's quite a long time.
Yep. Have done stints away overseas and working in Germany and France, exhibiting and making artwork, making sculptures. And then I did 1 year in Wanganui as the Taihape Cottage Artisan Residence, which was one of the highlights of it's getting a long career now.
Yeah, it really is. So let's go back all the way to the beginning. You were born in Castor Bay in 1957. North Shore boy, went to Westlake Boys. So can you tell us about your childhood and what kind of creative child you were?
Okay, well, I've just been thinking about that recently, little models I used to make. Well, of course, Castor Bay is coastal, right on the beach. We overlooked Rangitoto, overlooked the channel, used to see all the ships coming in and out. It was fantastic. Both my mother, Molly, and my father, Tiger, were incredibly supportive. My mother was a teacher, so she always saw that as a profession. She didn't think that being an artist would, you'd survive. So she always encouraged me to go teaching. And once I finished school and university, it was a really white middle class. We're very fortunate to have a very comfortable upbringing there. As a kid, my father loved making models. He had got his master's ticket at sea, so he got his ship's captain, and came ashore early when he started having a family, and he worked on the Auckland waterfront as a stevedore in charge of the ships coming in and out and all the watersiders. But he loved making models of boats and puppets, and so he'd always been doing that in the evenings, and I think it rubbed off a little bit. He taught me how to blow things, enlarge things with good patterns, and I remember making an actual little cardboard model boat and submarines and things like that. So it was, I was very lucky.
Yeah, that would have been such an inspiration and such a good role model for you, and you can see how that's gone on through to what you're doing now. Yeah. And you were diagnosed with dyslexia when you were quite young, and I have read that you found art as that was your passion at school.
I think what it was I was good at art. I was much better at that than the typical thing of reading and writing, and which most dyslexics say. So I did really struggle early on, and right through my schooling, and went through Elam, Auckland University, and really struggled with that writing because there weren't computers and things back then.
No AI.
And it was my mother who, because she used to teach me. She was a part-time teacher at Campbell's Bay Primary where I went, and she was the one who picked it up that I was really struggling with my reading and writing. By that stage, I think in those early days, because I loved painting and drawing and making things, I think very early on I developed a few skills and perception and distances and how to, make shapes and things like that. So and I always loved it, and that's what I wanted to do with my life from an early age, be an artist.
And I did read somewhere that you made a concrete sculpture for Westlake Boys, which is still there. Yes,
I did. One of my high school teachers and very influential was Paul Dibble.
Wow.
The bronze, and he was behind it in my sixth form to build this sculpture. So I made a model using blocks of wood and ended up making it in concrete, and probably spent 2 months building it, bits of every day, using pallets for boxing and 44-gallon drums as inside it to block it all up. And it's still there today. In fact, they tried to enlarge the library, and there was staff at the school who remembered me as a student, and they really protested that the sculpture was dismantled for the library. So the library went out in a different direction.
Really? Wow, that's so good. How incredible that some of those teachers were still there.
Yes, yep.
Yeah.
I actually went back and taught there for a year as well. Filled in for John Horner, and had a wonderful year back teaching at Westlake. And even to today, I still have strong associations. I'm just jumping forward a bit because I'm doing probably one of my more exciting projects for me is I've been called in to work with students who became writers and students from the school, ex-students. So there's some really famous students who went through, became musicians, poets, novelists, playwrights, journalists. So my job is to use their words, their lyrics, and to create permanent artworks around the school. And to date, I think there's 7, but I'm working with people like Harry Sinclair and Don McGlashan, the estate of Dave McCartney, who was in Hello Sailor. With his work, I took a section of Gutter Black, the song Gutter Black, which he wrote and sang, and I've cut all the letters out in aluminium by hand with a plasma cutter, and they all come down the outside of an outdoor staircase. So it's like ticker tape. So it comes different angles coming down the stairs, and I've left it all in the colour of the steel H-beam, which was galvanised, so they're sort of silver, so they just blend in a slightly different tone. It's just beautiful.
That sounds really beautiful.
Yeah, Harry Sinclair, he wanted me to use one of his songs that he wrote for The Front Lawn, which he was in with Don McGlashan, and he sent in handwriting, so I blew his handwriting up, cut it all to 2 meters across the length of between these 2 pillars up in the air, as part of a new building, and I cut it all out of 5mm thick steel, had it all galvanised, and so it's his perfect handwriting coming right across between these 2 pillars, and up at the top of the stairs you're looking out at it against the blue sky, and it's just beautiful. Yeah, Don McGlashan, I cut. He wanted me to use the lyrics from oh, crikey, it'll come back to me. Bathe in the River, which Holly Smith sang for a movie. I can't recall the name of the movie. So I just cut that out of a big sheet of what I think it was 10mm thick steel plate, and had it all galvanised both in te reo and English, and that's just bolted onto another outdoor staircase. And one of my highlights was I cast 2 manholes covers out of cast iron, both had haikus from Richard von Sturmer. A lot of people would know Richard. He's in Auckland, and he works in Onehunga as a Buddhist monk there. And he was the lead singer of a punk band many years ago called The Plague. And he also wrote the lyrics for There Ain't No Depression in New Zealand.
Really?
For Don McGlashan. So that was quite a well-known song. Anyway, so I went through the process of casting, making a clay mould off a manhole cover, and then I used fridge magnets and pushed the words into the clay. Eventually I cast it in fiberglass, and it probably took me 80 hours, the first one, to go around cleaning up all the undercuts and using builder's bog sanding, so there were absolutely no undercuts because there was about 100 letters in it, and took it to the foundry, and so it was cast in cast iron. It now it's been set in concrete, so the students at Westlake walk over it. There's 2 of them in there, and another one at the moment I'm working on is for Michael Gifkins, who was an editor and a publisher, ex-Ducks of Westlake Boys, and I'm just working out how to use his words. And Stephen Sinclair, who wrote Ladies' Night and co-wrote a lot of the early Peter Jackson movies, another ex-student, and I ran for 3 meters these beautiful laser-cut letters, probably about 500 of them, down this wall, and they've all been painted the same colour as the wall, so you just get these most beautiful shadows creating the actual poem.
Wow.
Yeah.
That just sounds unbelievable. And for you, what an incredible project.
Oh, it's fantastic.
Yeah.
And the school, they've sort of given me it's like an open canvas. And so that's great. So I find unusual sights and things, and do collages, and then little models and drawings, and all I have to do is we pass it by the headmaster, and he's very happy because it's transforming the school.
Yes.
And so hopefully as more and more every year I keep adding to it. I'm doing 2 this year. The other one is Reg Mombassa. He used to be in Mental as Anything, and of course is known for he's been in Australia for many years. I'm just working with Reg at the moment, and it's really exciting meeting and working with all these people.
Yeah, I mean it's like you're working in a place that you were involved with as a young man, and then connecting with other students who have done so well, been so successful, and then sort of giving back to current students. It's just lovely.
That's the idea, to let current students and future students realise that there's opportunities in different ways, and it'd be really nice if Westlake became really known for its writers, for instance, and artists from that, and dancers and things, rather than as well as the sporting prowess that they've always had.
That's right. Yeah, it always was quite a sports heavy school. I went to Westlake Girls actually, just a bit after you. Yeah. And my brothers went to Westlake Boys. My brother was Ducks as well, actually. My brothers were very smart academically. And I actually had Holly Smith was in a small choir when I was teaching at Takapuna Normal Intermediate, which is one of the feeders into Westlake Girls and Boys. I had a small choir which I took, and Holly Smith was in that choir, weirdly.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, and they sang at our wedding.
Oh.
Yeah, so that's my little claim to fame. And she was amazing, already writing her own songs and singing and performing then at 12 years old.
It's interesting when you scratch the surface, just these ties and things. And actually, while we're talking of Westlake, I was very honoured a few years back now. I was asked to design an archway for the entrance to the school. And it took 4 years from conception to have it completed. It's really huge. And it's all made of 16, 18 mil thick steel plate, and it's like a ribbon that goes up into there and twists and curves and come back down to the ground. And it's used as an entranceway to the school for new students starting the school. So they have a ceremony every year where the students actually walk through it. And it's, universities and other schools do have these things. It could just be a doorway, or a door that they pass through, but this is quite a major sculptural entranceway, and it's a great honour. They're not supposed to go back through it until they leave the school. I was never told what happens to those that get thrown out when they get dragged back through it. But so you enter it into this place of education, and you're not supposed to enter it again until you leave. Yeah,
I love that. Wow, I mean, we'll get to this, but you. With a career that's gone for more than 40 years, you must just have incredible opportunities, incredible commissions and people coming to you all the time from the reputation that you've built and the amazing work that you do. You mustn't be short of those kind of projects and commissions.
No, I've been very lucky with some really interesting and unusual projects.
Yeah.
It is. I survive from commissions, basically. That's what I do, commissions. So I make things for people, so I'm always having to consider what they want. And sometimes that means being repetitive, which I don't enjoy so much. It is tougher and tougher because of this, so many hundreds and hundreds of new artists coming out of the art schools, which is fantastic. So, of course, people who collect art and stuff want new people coming through as well. So, for people like me who've been doing it for some time, it does become more of a struggle.
But I feel like you're unique as an artist, and your work is quite standalone. Don't you think?
Possibly. I've I'm probably quite well known for making tin animals out of corrugated iron, which I've done right from when I first started with corrugated iron, and we'll get back to why I started working with corrugated iron. But that for me has become, even today I still get a lot of people wanting me to make animals and birds, and I tried to stop. 10 years ago I stopped doing it, and I just ran out of work. And because I'm an employer, I have 2 employees, and sometimes for projects we've had up to 7 people working, because I bring them in for a big project. I just couldn't survive. So I still today I don't like doing it. I've just taken on a huge project which will take me right through till Christmas. I don't enjoy doing it. It's really tough on the body. I'm getting on a bit now. I've just hit 66. But that's what I do. And and because I'd like to make sure something works before I let it out of the studio, I'll go that extra distance. Even if someone's paying me $100 or $5,000, I'll still work on that thing until I'm happy with it. And I think then my ability to create things goes way back to those days when I couldn't read or write, and I relied on drawing and painting and visually looking at things. And I think I developed those skills way back then, and have just honed them a lot over the years.
Yeah, I bet you have. And that, having to make the animals, which I guess was what made you very well known and very popular at the beginning of your practice. I guess that's kind of like a bread and butter for you.
It's bread and butter and sometimes icing on the cake. Look, I still meet people who saw or reckon they helped me install a whole herd of elephants in Albert Park way back in 1985. So there we go. They were facades of elephants. And I'd made one for a client in Wellington, and then it was seen for someone up in Auckland who commissioned me to make them a fence of elephants. And so I'd been teaching in Dannevirke. I went back and taught at Westlake, of course, and then for a year. And then in 1982, and then in 84, I taught in Dannevirke, where I made this facade of an elephant. Now, it was James Wallace who saw the elephant, and he commissioned me to make a fence for his property in Arnie Crescent because the neighbours had chopped down all the trees, and they were arguing over who was going to pay for a new fence. So he had seen the elephant, and he commissioned me to make this fence of elephant. So I made 13 facades of elephants on this farm where I was living in Dannevirke, all cut by hand with tin snips and riveted together, and I changed the direction of the corrugations to emphasise different parts of the anatomy of an elephant. The ears would go one way, and the trunk, and the legs, and a leg in front of the body would go in a different direction. So it sort of created movement. And then I thought it was quite apt to use roof paints. And way back then even today, there's a lot of different colours. So I was using, Dulux paints, roof paints, where I was using pinks and blues and reds and yellows. So they're quite arbitrary colours for an elephant, but very apt for corrugated iron.
Yeah.
And so they last. Anyway, so I did these, and and I thought, God, they're looking really good. And I thought it'd be nice for other people to see them before they disappeared into James's garden, where only he and the neighbour would see them. And I can't remember whether it was James or I suggested we have them with the backsides facing the neighbour, which is what happened. So they looked towards onto James's property. And, I thought, gosh, it'd be nice for people to see them. So I wrote to Kath Tizard, the then Mayor of Auckland, and got permission to put them in Albert Park. And in her response to me, she said they hoped they would breed because they needed a new elephant at the Auckland Zoo. And I put them in Albert Park overnight with scaffold, and got a few friends to come along because I thought I might need security. Slept in the band rotunda for 9 nights, lived there for 9 nights and days with a homeless person called Bill, who had made a little cardboard house in there, and he showed me how to make a cardboard house. My friends only lasted 1 night because Bill was quite upset that he had all these people infiltrate his bedroom, the band rotunda. So I spent 9 days living with Bill, and he ended up looking after the elephants as well. But what happened was, rather than any attempts at theft or vandalism, what it was the opposite. Thousands of people came to see them because there was a picture on the front page of the Herald. They were on the television news twice, and for a time the police had to come and put barriers across the walkways because people were actually driving their cars into Albert Park as if it was an annex to the Auckland Zoo, rather than the Auckland City Art Gallery, to look at these elephants. And I still meet people today. They remember those elephants, and some people even recollect helping me install them.
Really?
So yes, I'm always meeting people.
That's an amazing story, and it feels like, I think a lot of the work that you do, there is a bit of a sense of humour behind it.
I suppose there is, but that's also the clients who commission me to make things. Yeah, so it's often their thoughts. It's not my ideas. Often. It's just how I do it. So I make them my way and through discussions, and so that's quite unusual for an artist also, to spend a lot of their time, 80% of their time, making things for other people. But that's what I do. And to add to that, 10 years later, I did make an elephant for the Auckland Zoo. And it's still there today at the entrance. When you go in, it's the entrance to going in towards the giraffe enclosure.
Yeah, I know it. Yeah. Amazing.
And when I was making that in 1990, early 90s, I was installing it. They had the old administration block at the zoo, and it was attached to that, and you went between the legs through to the souvenir, the souvenir shop. So the idea was you'd walk out through the legs of the elephant into the shop. Anyway, I was working on it late one afternoon. It was a Friday, and the deputy director of the zoo, who was living on site, was going to let me out, but he went off to see a play, and he was going to come back at about 10 o'clock to let me out, and he never did. Never turned up, and I made my way, probably wrongly, in the darkness, through the myriad of tracks through the zoo to try and find his house, and never found it. And when I got back, I realised I was going to have to make my own escape. So I used my ladder and climbed up onto the roof of the administration block, pulled the ladder up, walked across the roof, put the ladder down into the car park, and got down and managed to escape.
Oh, that's so good. You must have so many fantastic stories. This is very exciting listening to you speak. So let's just go all the way back to 1981 when you studied you studied fine arts at Elam School of Fine Art, and you obviously left school thinking you wanted to be an artist. So what was your plan when you left, and when you were at Elam, what were you thinking?
Well, I really enjoyed going to Elam as a student. I really loved it and thrived on it. And I started off doing I really enjoyed screen printing and painting. So I did a lot of screen printing and painting in my first 3 years. And then I sort of hit a brick wall. At that stage, I had, through my mother's suggestion and also the economics of it, I had taken up a studentship to go teaching. So I was being paid, by term to go to university on the condition that I spent at least a year teaching following.
Right.
Or you had to pay back your studentship plus, I think. So that's what I did. So I wasn't sure whether I wanted to go teaching, but that was always there when I was a student there. And after 3 years, still on the studentship, I decided to take a year off, which I did, and I went off and I spent a year travelling, mainly down to Dunedin and living down there, doing a lot of walking, hitchhiking, lack of rides, and I used to enjoy walking, so I started walking everywhere. And then I went back a year later and finished off, by which time what I was doing changed dramatically, because I started doing a lot of artwork which related to my walks. And then, of course, I went to Teachers College the following year.
That's really interesting. And you were studying to be a secondary teacher?
Yes. Yes.
And so those walks, do you think that they had some influence on the work that you started making? They did have a huge influence. It changed the direction of what I was doing.
I really didn't know where to go, what direction to go in, and I hitchhiked down to Dunedin at the beginning of 1980 to visit a friend, David Rhodes, who was doing marine biology. I'd been at Westlake with David, and so I went down to visit him and ended up staying there, and I got a crib out at Portobello and lived out at this crib for $10 a week, so I didn't have to work, and I would paint and draw out there. And every Friday I would walk the 14, 15 kilometres into Dunedin around a very windy road, and I'd spend the weekend living at David's flat, and we just used to play tennis. And then on the Sunday I would walk back to Portobello. It was about a 4-hour walk. And then I had a brother getting married. My oldest brother, Scott, was getting married to Jenny in Christchurch in October of that year, and I ended up walking up to the wedding. So it was 368 kilometres or something like that. So I spent 13 or 14 days walking, just sleeping, no tent or anything, just sleeping on the side of the road, wherever I, under bridges, in paddocks. And it was on that walk I had a camera with me, and I started photographing all the roadside paraphernalia that you see, because it's like you're living in a parallel world. You know, all these cars, if you're on a road, whizzing past. It was just a totally different world. And so I became fascinated by things like little bits of cars and nuts and bolts, coloured stones off the centre line, road markers, squashed animals where all that was left was the impregnation of a skin in the tar seal. So all those little things, of course, you wouldn't see or notice when you're speeding along in the car. And roadside advertising, I found that road markers, depending on where they'd been cut, different provinces had different cuts at the top of the bits of wood themselves. And newspaper nameplates, I started collecting them. Letterboxes, they became like roadside sculptures with different colours, different names. They were paintings, paint coming off them. One of my tutors was Don Binney when I was in the painting department at Elam, and he always said, doesn't matter if it's three-dimensional, if it's got paint on it, it's also a painting. And so I've always considered that to be a rule that I've always gone by. Anyway, so I did this walk, and when I went back to Elam the following year, and I did another walk around the East Cape over Christmas of that year, and over 5 or 6 days from leaving from Opotiki out to the East Cape Lighthouse.
Beautiful.
And very different environment. So I became interested in all these things, and through seeing all this advertising, some of it was almost folk art where people had made things themselves, I came up with this little idea of making little sculptures, advertising along the way. So I did a test walk when I went back to Elam, and where I did a walk all around north of Auckland, around Dairy Flat, out through Helensville, Kaukopakoppa, up to Makaurau, back into Silverdale, Wainui, down the Albany Highway, back to Riverhead, Coatesville. 5 days looking at letterboxes and photographing them. And then I did a walk, and this was all under the watchful eye of Don Binney, because he thought it was fabulous, and he said, look, I could do whatever I wanted, I think, as long as I turned up once a month, to show up. But he was, as long as I could prove I was out there exploring art, and he was happy for me to do that. So I'm very thankful.
Yeah, how incredible to have someone like him.
I did have to go back and do presentations, though, to the students, and it was on the first one from that North Auckland walk. Afterwards, he said to me, Jeff, you're really onto something there. And that's when he was really encouraging. And that's, I came up with this idea of combining walking and doing advertising. So I did a walk from Bulls to New Plymouth, and through Wanganui up through Taranaki, where I wrote this letter, typed it out as just a little bit about myself, my interest in walking, advertising, and it was an offer to make a little cutout shape to sit on top of a letterbox or a fence post or be seen from the roadside that commented on or said something about the people who lived on the property or something about the property. Didn't have to, if it was a dairy farm, it didn't have to do with dairying or anything. It could have, and I delivered 352 letters on that walk, and I made drawings of every single letterbox. I had a lands and survey maps, and I marked where these letterboxes were on the walk, and I wrote names on letterboxes, so I knew exactly if someone wrote to me, I would know I'd know where they lived, and I would know what sort of brackets to make for their letterbox because I knew exactly what their letterbox looked like.
This is incredible.
And so, but I only got, and I offered to make these things free of charge, and I got, I think 7 people wrote back to me. So it wasn't a great response. And I made a foot for a chiropodist. I made a motorbike for a motorbike enthusiast. I made a horse. I made some cattle. I made a sheep. They were all screen printed and just cut out of plywood. And from that, the next walk I did was from Woodville down to Marsden. And this time I used photographs from what I'd done in Wanganui Way, and if I saw someone gardening or milking cattle early in the morning, I'd go and talk to them and knock on doors, and the response jumped from about 3% up to 20%. People wanted me to make things. So I started making, still free of charge, making all these objects. So I built up quite a collection of cutout shapes on letterboxes.
Yeah.
And my final exhibition in the painting department at the end of my 4th year at Elam, I set it up like a production unit where I had boxes full of printed different shapes, animals, cattle, all different things. It was like a production line. So it was
Wow, that is so fascinating. And do you think you obviously ended up loving walking, but did you see the walking and the thinking and the sort of creating as all kind of working together? Were you actually walking so that you could create something for Elam, or which one came first?
To start off with that walk, well let's go forward to probably my 3rd biggest walk was from Bulls up to New Plymouth. Bulls to New Plymouth. It rained the whole time, and I remember thinking, here am I walking in the rain, didn't know where I was going to be sleeping, wasn't making money, didn't have any money. And I really did wonder what I was doing, why I was doing it. And it paid off eventually, but there was real uncertainty.
Why were you doing these big walks?
I don't know. I just went from A to B. I wanted to walk from A to B. I wasn't interested in walking from, Cape Reinga down to Bluff. I was interested in just looking at specific areas and meeting people, and that's always been right through my career, from putting those elephants in Albert Park, where I wanted to. I was looking for an audience rather than putting work in an art gallery where the audience comes to that. I've always been conscious of finding new audiences, and that I think was part of that. Putting letterboxes into letterboxes was finding people who possibly would not normally go to an art gallery.
Yeah,
and that sort of was quite instrumental in my early thinking. To start off with, it was subconscious. I didn't realise, and then I realised that's what I was doing. I was out there doing things, putting work in country fairs and A&P shows, and looking for audiences that were not normally an art audience.
And I wonder where that came from.
Just came to
you. I mean, you were used to making personally, and then you just went to sort of making for others, but not in this sort of usual formal sense. Yeah, that's really interesting. And so your first corrugated iron work was a cow, wasn't it?
Look, it was in the Ikitahuna. I made a small cow on a letterbox, and someone who saw that, found out where I lived, wrote to me and commissioned some work made in corrugated iron. And then people who saw that, those things, commissioned me to make things in corrugated iron. And it was the artist Bronwyn Corner, the ceramicist, who said to me one day, she said, "Jeff, have you ever thought of working full-time for 3 or 4 years with corrugated iron and just see what happens?" She doesn't recall saying that to me, but I've always remembered it was her who said to me, whether it was a good thing or not, I don't know, but 35 years later, I do lots of other things, but I still am set up. It's because my studio is set up with all the equipment and machinery, roll formers for curving. I've got 6 of them, each weighing about 250 kilos plus. I've got them in France. I've got them in Australia. And the one in France, I move around Europe, so I've got an instant studio, and I've done a lot of work in Germany and Holland. Wow. Germany, quite a lot of work going over there for 2 or 3 years, plus public sculptures in Berlin and touring exhibitions. So it's been fantastic.
Yeah.
I didn't realise what was going to happen. And I suppose they say have tin snips will travel. Hundreds of trips to Australia, working in Australia. And over the years, like I've got a lot of work in public galleries in Australia and collections. I've actually got a collection of Australian stamps with my work on it, to do with corrugated iron. And so whether they must have realised I wasn't Australian when they phoned me to Australia Post when they got in contact.
Or they might have tried to steal you and say you were Australian like they often do.
Yeah. You're also talking and looking at possibly the only person in the world who sells kangaroos to Australia. I've done a number of kangaroos. There's 3 huge, big ones, 3 metres high at Canberra Airport, which are out actually next to the tarmac and on the grass. So when the planes come in, they're actually a marker for planes coming in. And they were made for the owner of Canberra Airport, who's brought a lot of work by New Zealand artists for the airport and for their private collection down on the coast out from Canberra. So I've had a number of requests and made a number of kangaroos, all different, sometimes coloured, sometimes painted. And I should just point out that I still see myself as a painter. Very much, I'm still very involved with texture and collage. It's just that I'm often using other people's colour. So I'm using second-hand weathered iron a lot of the time, and I have it in racks in my studio like a lithographer would have stones. I have coloured big chunks of stacking, all like reds or blues or pinks. So I can pick and choose colours as I go. So I'm still really much working with other people's colour.
Yeah. Paint. And you're still screen printing, aren't you?
And I screen print. I used to. It's a long story, but I once took a roofing company to court over what's called passing off, where a television advert was made where they'd made all these animals out of corrugated iron, which suggested me, and they had an actor who was visiting from Canada, walking around with a beret, and it was called passing off, where they're using someone's reputation to sell their product without that person's permission.
Right.
So there was a payout on that, and
you won that. That's good.
Yeah. Anyway, so I used that money to went back into the arts, because I went travelling in Europe, and it was over there, travelling by train and going to a lot of small villages and houses in the countryside in Italy, southern France and Spain, where I suddenly became aware one day that you see all these houses being built and they're being clad with different types of roofing. There were corrugations, terracotta tiles, concave and convex, slate, lead, thatched houses, roofs. And it was just a flash and a thought, look, I've made all these objects, but I had never clad an existing object, or made something and clad. And that's my first thought was, oh gosh, it'd be wonderful to cover a car. So ideas come from all over the place. And that was just that. So, one thing leads to the other.
It feels like you've got ideas and ideas and ideas. It's probably hard for you to actually manage your ideas. You have so many. At times. Yeah.
At times. The car, well, I did do that. I came back to New Zealand and I tried to find someone with a Volkswagen. I wanted to curve the tin and clad a car. But none of my friends would let me use their Volkswagen. And I'd bought an old HQ Holden station wagon when I was living in Hastings, Napier. And this is back in the late 1980s. And eventually I clad that. I went and saw Ministry of Transport and got permission to... They had no problem as long as there was no sharp edges, nothing flapping on the surface or nothing coming off more than 2 centimetres off the surface.
Really? They probably wouldn't let you do it now.
I used to drive it for 3 years and it ended up going to Australia, and then it came back in was used in a television documentary I fronted on corrugated iron, and then it went to Te Papa. But I did drive it unfinished with sharp edges and not, a little bit of loose tin for a while, but...
That's incredible. That's a great way to get your name out there, I suppose.
Well, it's going and finding another audience, because you're meeting an audience just out driving on the road. And
That's right.
I used to get pulled over by gangs. I was pulled over by gangs. I'd be saluted by the Black Power, because I'd earlier made them a big fist for their 21st birthday celebrations in Wellington, so they knew me. Oh, one time with the Holden, it was interesting. It opened up some more work, because South Pacific Pictures approached me about they were doing a Ray Bradbury theatre series for North American television, and one of the episodes, the hero was an American. The Americans were up on Mars mining, and the hero drove my car, or a car, and so the corrugated iron car was ideal. So I put another chunk-shaped piece on the roof for them. They hired the car for filming for 2 weeks, so they paid me a small amount actually, but I used that money and I bought a Mori Thau I'd seen on the side of Kennedy Road in Napier, and I quickly covered that. So by the time I got my station wagon back, I had a covered Mori Thau. But what I did, the station wagon, I clad with rusty weathered iron, which came off the roof of the Criterion Hotel in Napier, which had been gutted by fire on Halloween, pumpkins, candles, and hay bales.
Oh wow, not a good combo.
And obviously a drunken audience.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that was, of course, what happens with corrugated iron. It was beautifully weathered, different tones of rust. And of course, what happens is with any steel, if it's not protected, like the galvanising, the zinc coating, which we call galvanising in paint, is to protect the iron from rusting and weathering. And once that's been exposed to the elements, which happens through wear and tear, the sun, but also fire, and because that burns off, an intense fire will burn off the zinc layer, and of course it rusts immediately, and that's what had happened to the roof of the Criterion Hotel. So the station wagon is clad in this most beautiful rustic colour. With the Mori Thau, I introduced lots of second-hand colour, so it's more patchwork and curved. And I drove that for a number of years too, and that now lives in the Canterbury Museum. That's where it is now.
Really?
Yeah.
And what do you think, why do you think Te Papa wanted that car, that Holden?
Tina Barton was one of the curators at the time, who went on for many years at the Adams Gallery. They knew it had gone to Australia, and they thought that I'd sold it in Australia. So when they heard that it was back in New Zealand, BHP shipped it free of charge for me, because I got sponsorship from BHP. Mm-hmm. And I should point out, originally it went to Australia because General Motors I thought they wanted to have an exhibition and have it in their production, and use it for publicity. But all they wanted was a photograph for their in-house magazine. So I went to this huge effort and got BHP to sponsor it and ship it across to Australia. Had to go over and get it roadworthy, because it was covered in rust. You're not allowed to have rust on your vehicle. So it was a major job to get it roadworthy. It did have I found out later on that I'd been given a motor in exchange and it was stolen. So the mechanic who eventually fixed it up for me and gave it the warrant, he put a new number on it. Anyway, so I should point out, and I did tell Setting Beddington at the time, who was the director of Te Papa, I actually sold it to them with a stolen motor in it.
Really?
Yeah.
There are so many incredible stories, and sort of stories within stories.
Yeah. So it spent a year in Australia, came back. It came back for filming for this a work of art. It was a work of art series, looking at corrugated iron, which I fronted and went around talking to architects, other artists, and just generally looking at corrugated iron buildings. And it was an hour or 50-minute television program.
Was it a series?
No, it was a one-off.
Okay.
It was aimed at young directors and producers to give them the opportunity to be creative. Mm. Yeah.
Is that still available?
Yes, it is. It'll be digital now. That was way back in 1994 that was filmed. Mm. And it was great because the cameraman was Alan Bollinger. Al Bol, were very famous in the filming industry. And he was one. I'd met him before because I once spent 8 weeks working on the west coast of the South Island, working in schools, psychiatric hospitals, unemployed, members of the public, making sculptures up and down the west coast. And that was another fantastic experience, meeting and working with people who weren't in the art world. Yeah. Going back to Wanganui, actually, because I just thought of another project there, which again went out looking for a non-art audience. My proposal to do the Tiley Cottage Artist in Residence, which is done through the Sargent Art Gallery and the Wanganui City Council, my proposal was that I'd been working with corrugated iron by that stage for 15 years, full-time almost, and my proposal was that I become a roofer in the community and go out and work on people's rooftops with roofing products. And it was accepted, and I had to face reality arriving in Wanganui early in 2000 with the prospect of then having to go out and find people who would let me do things to their rooftops. And I'd played around way back in 95, actually, when I did the Francis Hodgkins Fellowship, with screen printing onto flat metals, taking them to a roofing factory and getting them to run through their machinery. So I was making beautifully made corrugated iron flashings, ridgings, ridge caps, and I did do a little bit of putting them onto buildings in Dunedin during that year. But it really took off in Wanganui, where I went and saw a Wanganui roofing company, and I would get coils of different widths of metal from them, and I would go away and clean it all up, etch it, prime it, print it, often both sides, depending on what it was for, and I'd cover it with a plastic film, which I used to get from New Zealand Steel. I'd get their leftover rolls of this plastic film, which was used for putting on colour steel to protect it. And I'd cover it with that. Then I'd take it back to the Wanganui roofing factory, and we'd run it through their machinery. So I was getting this beautifully commercially made roofing products, and then I would go out and I would actually put it onto people's houses. So I would replace a roof or chunks of a roof, or in one instance there was a wonderful, she became a friend, Edna Cook, and she lived at Upakongaro, just up on the Wanganui River, north of Wanganui by 10-15 kilometres. All her guttering had rusted away, and she loved gardening, so I made a painting in her garden, and then I separated all the colours and put them onto several silk screens, and I printed onto these thin widths of steel, this coil, took it back to the roofing company, and I made must have made about 60 metres of guttering, printed inside and out, and then I installed it all around her house and studio.
Wow.
So just little things like that. I started making lead head nails, casting them, carving into wood, and then holding the flat head nail in it and pouring little bits of lead in. And I started re-roofing houses with custom-made nails. So it was and that was like jewellery. Instead of on the body, jewellery on the roof. And I did a whole milking cow shed just to the west of Wanganui. And it's still there today. Really? And since then it's been painted. Someone went to paint the roof, and they were painting the building, and they painted them, which was really nice because I'd left them in their natural colour of lead, sort of, and so they're all now a grey green, just Beautiful. Like you'd paint roofing. And what was interesting, I'd already made some roofing nails for another project in Dunedin when I was the Francis Hodgkins Fellow, and I'd made a box for an exhibition, and Ralph Hotary, who was living there, he saw the box and he rang me, and I wanted to buy them because I didn't have them for sale. And I said, no, I wasn't going to sell them. Anyway, he turned up the very next day with 3 or 4 bottles of wine with a label on he had designed, and wanting me to give him some of these nails. So I showed him how I made them, and I poured some on the spot, and he took them away. And the very next day he came back with a piece of wood he had carved with crosses, and I cast a whole lot of nails for him, and he helped, and he started using them in his artwork, which was really nice. And today you still find some of his works where he's used these big clunky lead head nails. Some of the nails that I cast for him from these wooden moulds. I've still got the wooden moulds today, and they're really beautiful.
Wow.
Interestingly enough, I also showed him how to corrugate, because he would use his oxyacetylene and angle grinder on flat sheets of stainless steel, and then he'd send them up to Oamaru, I think it was Oamaru or Timaru, to a roofing factory, and they'd turn them into baby iron or corrugate them. But they would just be delivered back to him, corrugated. And he'd never seen it done. And I had one of my roll formers outside the studio at the university there. And so I showed him one day how to do it, how I did it. And he came along with an offcut of stainless steel, and he used my angle grinder and made patterns all over it. And he used the oxyacetylene and burnt it to get patterns in the stainless steel, because you get beautiful, beautiful patterns coming to burning. And then I corrugated it for him, so he could have a look and see how it was corrugated. So that was great fun, and I've still got that piece today, because he left it, and I called out to him, and it was a bit like that advert you see on television with the young woman at the petrol station, and her father leaves her a bar of chocolate, and she calls out to him and says, "Oh, you forgot this." That's what I said to him. "You forgot this," and he said, "No, you can have it."
Wow, that's going to be a collector's item. Mm. Yeah, it's very special. Yeah.
So the roofing for me was a major highlight in my career as an artist, and again working with reality. There I was. I remember early on ripping off a big chunk of a friend's roof out at the beach, near the beach, and big rain clouds on the horizon. 3:00 in the afternoon. Fortunately, we were okay, and I got some tarpaulins over the roof we'd think. So in his roof, what I did, he lived by the right by Castle, right on the beach there. So I used seaweed and shells and sand and scattered them over silk screens, and then printed them onto flat sheets, which I got corrugated, and rebuilt them onto big chunks of his roof.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
So what were you thinking when you were doing that kind of work? Were you saw it as just what you wanted to be making as part of your art practice, and how were you actually funding it?
It was a development of it was a development, and it was an exciting development for me. And it felt real. Once again, away from galleries and things. It was art out there in real life, and it was functional. So I think it was Gregory O'Brien pointed out in an article, here I was with Michelangelo, they were looking up at the Renaissance painters were looking up at the gods and things, whereas I was making something for the gods to look down upon.
Yeah, so true. I love that. Yeah. And how were you supporting yourself?
What I did with that, I was on a stipend, or I was given a weekly allowance, which still happens today, from the council as the resident. What I did was, the people I made things for, I said, you cover the cost of materials and I'll give my time free. That's how I did it. And it was quite expensive. It was a huge amount of time into it, because the inks I were using were from Germany, and they were a 2-pot ink, ideal so they wouldn't fade with too much UV light. So there was a big cost involved, but the people paid for the cost, and it was my time. I just did it.
So you weren't, as an artist, you were clearly so passionate about the making and who was seeing your work and how it was being used, that you weren't thinking about, how to make a proper living at that point. No,
I wasn't too worried. It was in survival mode.
But you must have just been so passionate, and you must have really believed in what you were doing. Did you feel like at some point you were going to be able to make some money out of this?
No. And I've thought it'd be wonderful, and I'm still mooting the idea to do a project like that in Helensville. So Helensville will become a place where you could go around Helensville, go there, and there might be 10 or 12 actually buildings which I'd worked on, which you could stand on the side of the road and look at, and the cost is pretty expensive to do that.
It would be amazing to have that in Helensville. Yeah. A bit like Kawakawa, Hunavas's
yes
influence in that area.
I'm pleased you didn't say T-Rail.
What's happening to T-Rail?
T-Rail's got all the corrugated iron, the sheep and the stuff, which people often think I made it.
Oh, really?
I was originally asked to make the sheep for a wool store by the owner, and I was going to Australia, so I turned them down. So it was a local builder who had a roll former machine who made the original sheep there.
Yeah. How was that for you? I mean, like I said to you off air, there is so much that we could talk about, but you have been referred to as the corrugated iron man of Australasia. You were one of the first probably the first person to use corrugated iron in art. How does it feel when people use that same material and it is kind of, people probably do think that you actually made it? That must be quite a tricky tension.
Yeah. I'm not so annoyed now. It used to be really annoying, and because there's quite a difference. It used to be quite annoying, and I have taken a few times legal action or got legal advice and had to send out letters to get someone to desist from making something that was obviously a copy, just to let them know that, hey, that's not on.
And that it's not just the using the same material; it's actually the same ideas as well, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. And of course, there are a lot of other artists who'd worked with that material well before me. So maybe I probably build with it more as a building. I use it as a building material. And I remember Rosalie Gascoigne, the Australian New Zealand artist, saying at a lecture once at the Auckland City Art Gallery, she was talking about corrugated iron. She said, "Oh no, you don't make animals from." It was a direct, not a punch at me, but it was a direct reference. She would use it as it's found, curved, twisted. And like I did do that work with Ralph Hotry, I knew Rosalie and used to go and visit her in Canberra when I was there, and used to pop down from Sydney when I was working in Sydney and exhibiting there. So I let her use my electric nibbler, which cuts the tin. You just have to hold it. It's not that easy. And she had a go, and she said, "Oh, no, I can't use that." But I found out later that she did. And she did start cutting some of the corrugated iron and flat metal with the nibbler. She went and got her own one, apparently.
Wow.
So it's nice to think that maybe I was just a little bit influential.
Yeah, and she does amazing work too.
Yeah.
And the whole idea of having sometimes flat steel or iron and then making it into corrugated forms.
That's what I do. I did a lot of that, and it came about through collecting olive oil tins and petrol tins. The olive oil tins came from the south of Spain when I was on that European trip. And I got the tins, went and bought some tin snips, and I chopped them all up and shipped them back to England and sent 2 tea chests of printed tins with all this beautiful foreign language and colours. I shipped them back to New Zealand because I found I could corrugate them, and the pattern stayed on. And then I'd build with them. And that led me then to use I suddenly realised that I could put my own pattern, so I started screen printing more and more onto flat metal and aluminium and even big sheets of lead that I could then mould afterwards and change the shape of it. And I've done that, I've done it in many different ways. The ideas come from just day-to-day living. Like I used to have a studio when I was living in the Hawke's Bay next to up at the Otatra Arts Centre, where there was a group of artists, including people like David Trubridge, the furniture maker, and Lou Purvis had a studio up there, and Paramatchit, and Barna Paul was a Maori weaver who lived in one of the cottages, and I used to often pop over in the evenings and sit with her while she was weaving, and we'd have a cup of coffee and have a good chin wag. And one day I thought, gosh, I could try that. So the next day I went and I chopped a whole lot of strips of corrugated iron into 2 centimetre wide strips with a pair of tin snips, and then I had to use my fingers to re-corrugate them. Or no, I think I put them through one of my roll former to corrugate them perfectly. And then I found I could weave them because the concave and the convex shape would naturally fit over each other, so I could weave it. So I made myself a basket, a kete, very different to Maori weaving because mine was vertical and horizontal, where the Maori weavings, of course, are diagonal. And that night I had them wrapped up in newspaper, and much to Barna's delight, and she just laughed and laughed. We sat there, and while she was working, I pulled out all these strips and started weaving, and I wove this kete. It took me about an hour and a half to do it, which I then gave it to her, and I don't think she stopped laughing. But that led to a whole new series of works of weaving. Like I did some big weavings for a big project on Sculptor on the Gulf, where afterwards we worked out we'd cut and woven over 8,000 strips to make this big work, which went through this gully all around the tree roots and under flaxes. It was, wow. I called it carpet. Yeah, so the ideas come from playing with the material.
Yeah. And it's not just weaving, it's, stacking and layering and curving and twisting. And, it's almost like you have all these verbs of the things that you can do with this actual material. And it's almost never ending what the possibilities, I suppose.
I'm always trying, and it gets harder and harder the more you do. There's less new ones to do. But I have consciously tried to explore different ways, and I actually, what was quite influential, I read one day that Bill Woodrow was a British sculptor of the same vintage of our Bill Colbert, same era.
Yeah.
And he would go walking in Brixton every morning. He'd go for a walk and find materials and try and make something new every single day. And that set me thinking, so for a month I would get a sheet of corrugated iron and try and do something different with it. So I'd force myself. One day I got a sheet and I just cut the whole thing. It must have stretched out to about 20 metres, but it was all joined. Cutting it into strips and riveting them together so you saw the edge on. So I would try and force myself to make new things, and that all led to new different types of working. And even seeing in back gardens stacks, people often have stacks of corrugated iron, whether it's new on a building site or a new roof going up or an old stack of stuff people haven't been able to throw away. I became aware of that stacking and building like that, but also the end-on pattern of the aggregate of that pattern of the corrugations sitting inside each other, and also where they sat against each other. So a concave would sit against a convex. So I started building like that and making stacks, riveting them with thousands of rivets, and then I'd get out the angle grinder and carve. So I tried to carve like you would carve, and subtract, take away the material rather than add to it. And then I started developing these ideas. I've always been interested in different domestic crafts. So I found with strips, different thicknesses of strips, I could knit it. So I would knit the corrugated iron, and I'd use big bits of downpipe like the knitting needles.
Really?
Yes. So I'd finger knit it.
Oh my
I'd do
goodness.
that same. I could finger knit it. I also knitted it, but I also found I could French knit it. And as a kid, I used to do a lot of French knitting through cotton reels with the 4 nails.
Yes, I remember that.
And make slippers and pom-pom hats and things. And I tried making pom-poms. I've made pom-poms with it, strips. So strips of tin have been good to me.
Wow.
And
you've done wreaths and all sorts of really quite delicate works.
Yeah, so I've made rugs. I've been playing around lately with pull rugs, how I can use strips and, Alexander Calder, the American, did all the mobiles. He used to paint onto that square canvas or fabric which was used for the base of pull rugs. There's another name for it, pull rugs, where you'd pull and his wife Louisa used to make them. They're really beautiful. That gave me the idea of I could try that with corrugated iron, and so I've been playing around with that. And so I've tried different craft processes. Screen printing on the surface, turning it into lace. So I've cut it with plasma cutters to create lace. And one time, Shona and I went to Germany. We were invited. I met a woman who ran a gallery, and the husband was a professor in criminology at the university in Wuppertal. And I met them in Melbourne, and she said if ever I wanted, they'd seen a lot of my work in their travels in Australia, and she said, if you ever want to come and do any work in Germany, I'd love to do some work with you. So a year later, it was the year I came back from Dunedin. Shona was still working at the university as a photographer. I had some free time, so I rang her, and in my pidgin German and her pidgin English, on the grounds I thought she's going to be there, so I flew over to Germany. I flew to Amsterdam, stayed the night, got a train to Wuppertal the next day, and I was supposed to go back, but on the grounds that I'd come all that way from New Zealand to visit her, she said, I trust you to come and so she gave me an exhibition date for the following year. She said, people have been unreliable in the past, and she showed people like Tony Cragg, Gunther Oerker, a very famous German artist who used nails. So she had some quite famous artists who had shown with her and put work into her gallery. Anyway, she I ended up staying and having dinner. We went out to a kartoffel restaurant or a potato restaurant. Missed my train back, so we stayed the night. Got a train early the next morning, and flew back to New Zealand that night. So I was there for 2 nights.
Wow, that's incredible.
So I went to that trouble and arrived back quite tired. Of course, I wouldn't recommend doing it too often.
And then you worked towards the exhibition the following year.
We went and lived there and worked. She had a studio in a public park in the city of Wuppertal, which is famous for various reasons, but it population of about 500,000, just out of Dusseldorf. And the studio she rented from the council for 1 Deutschmark a year, and it was left over. It was a big garden, thick concrete 2-storied octagonal building, which had been a garden sort of shed for a house which had been destroyed during the bombing of the Second World War and never been rebuilt, and had become a park. So that's where I worked, and I always had open doors, so I always had people in the park coming to watch me and talk to me. And so I met quite a few Germans, students and different people there who still have a connection in a way with a lot of them. And but the reason I brought that German thing up was the very first show I made, it was all with lace. And I went round at night looking at lace. A lot of them had lace curtains in the houses. I wasn't peeping Toming, I was just looking at the lace. And I ended up making this exhibition in the gallery based off corrugated iron and lace. And I had also shipped one of my roll former machines over there, took it apart and put it back together in the studio. And I shipped over about 800 kilos of corrugated iron because it was cheaper to ship it than to buy it over there new.
Really?
It was really expensive. And I should say it was pointed out also by a journalist who did a little television item on my show. He said that if you lived in a corrugated iron building in Germany, it would be seen as one of the lowest forms of poverty imaginable, because after the war, those elder Germans who remembered lived in temporary Nissan sheds which were corrugated, which were built and brought in by the Americans for temporary housing. So it wasn't looked upon kindly.
Yeah.
But my show was looked upon kindly, and we had quite a few sales. And then I was invited to. She invited me back 2 years later to do another show, and also in the year 2000. This was 97 and 99, the German shows. In 2000. A town in eastern Germany called Plauen was famous for its black bobbin lace, and it actually won the premier gold medal at the World Expo in 1900, when the Eiffel Tower was built for the 89, I think it was 1898 it was built. Anyway, they'd won the premier gold top award, and the director of that museum in Plauen had seen my show, and I was invited there. So we on one of my trips, I went up and saw her and the staff, and I did a big show which went to the show from Wuppertal went up to Plauen, and then it combined with my show that I did in 99, the 97 and 97 show, and they both went touring around public museums and art galleries all over Germany and accumulated in a show in Berlin at the headquarters of the Housing Corporation. And what I like about in Germany, exhibitions are not just in galleries. I met a bank manager a retired bank manager and his family, and we went and had dinner with them, and he had Joseph Beuys show in the foyer of his bank. So there's these, so they're
more open to
different
doing
spaces.
Something different. Yeah.
So and then the show in Berlin led to a big public sculpture at the Berlin Zoo. So we went back in 2007, and the Berlin Zoo breed kiwi, and I was asked if I could build a big kiwi. So I made this big 2 meter tall kiwi, which still resides at the Berlin Zoo. And
that was stacked.
No, it was all curved.
Curved.
It has a big egg with it and ferns, and they make a little house, and a house gets put over to protect it. They know a lot of the sculptures, because the winters are so harsh, they build little protective roofs for them. So the kiwi has a roof over it over winter.
That's
and Helen
really
Clark,
cool.
Helen Clark was there signing an accord with Gerhard Schroeder for the opening. At the opening, it was all coincided with her visit. So she came along to the zoo and opened and unveiled the kiwi. Yeah,
Wow.
and then she and Shona went off to they were allowed to go down and hold. I think it was Otto and Kunsley were the Kiwi there. They're not open for the public. They're just a breeding program.
Gosh, I feel like we need to do like 10 episodes on the podcast, and we just kind of nip in every sort of few months or whatever. You come back and we tell some more stories, because I feel like you've just got, you've had an incredibly rich life, haven't you?
I haven't travelled for quite a few years, and most of my travelling's to Australia. Plus, every so often little things happen where there's other opportunities. Like we went and lived in a chateau in the south of France between Carcassonne and Toulouse, and that came about through the woman who had lived in Australia, had Australian citizenship, but she and her husband Dennis had bought this chateau, and she'd seen my show in Sydney at Ray Hughes Gallery, where I used to exhibit on a regular basis over many years. She'd seen that, so she rang me out of the blue, say, would you like to come and work on the chateau for 6 weeks? So we went off and lived there for 6 weeks making sculptures, and they looked after us. So the opportunities like that are few and far between, but when they come, it's great to
make the most of it.
Well, it makes your life more interesting and exposes you to different things, different
And what
cultures.
would you say to other artists in New Zealand? What advice would you have for them for gaining these kinds of opportunities?
Just keep going. Just do it. Things do happen. I suppose if what you do in some way is different or stands out and is not the norm, people take notice.
And if you're talented.
And the more you do and the more you get out there, the more people see it, and the more opportunities happen. That's one thing, because I have been very productive and I don't do anything else. That's all I do.
Yeah.
Is make art. So my life is very narrow, really, and it's not tunnel vision, but it has been for 30 years, totally concentrating on art.
Yeah, it's probably many of your thoughts are based around your practice.
They are, yeah. I don't dream about it, but if I can't sleep, I do think about projects. I like solving problems. How to do things, and I've got quite a few on at the moment to try and sort out.
Yeah, and you enjoy experimenting.
Love experimenting, and I wish instead of 80% of the time doing commissions, I just wish I had 100% experimenting.
Yeah, it must be tricky. I mean, you've got to that point where you are so well known and people want your work. It's that balance between wanting that work but then wanting to do your own stuff. How are you going to manage that in the future, do you think?
I sort of manage it, but not so well because of the material, and if it's outdoors, 30 years of a bit of corrugated iron outside, and if I've welded and stuff, it rusts. So I have spent a lot of time restoring work, which is not much fun, including public works.
Could you get someone else to do that part?
It's a bit hard to have someone else to do it. It's different. I've had things repainted in Australia, but it's not the same. Yeah, I like doing public work. I like the challenge. It can be quite stressful because of all the paperwork, everything, all the hoops you've got to jump through to do it. I'm currently got 2 or 3 public projects on, in early on stages happening, and it can be really stressful.
I can imagine.
Yeah, but I do like that opportunity to do new things and face new challenges, like having to make something in public which is going to last a long time. So I've done things with cast iron, as I mentioned, steel, corrugated iron, like the big gumboot and Taihape, which has survived since 2000 or the year 2000. So that's 24 years, and there's still little. I saw it recently. There's a tiny bit of rust where people have been sitting and all the paint has been worn off, but I've done nothing to it apart from put a patch on it once where a truck backed into it, and I just did that at night without anyone passing through. I didn't tell anyone from there. I just did it, and I one time climbed up and spray painted over someone had put a black handprint up on the sole. So I had some silver paint, and it was right at that stage opposite the police station, and I just climbed up it at night and spray painted so it was back to normal.
Really?
Yeah.
That's so good. Yeah.
That's another funny thing. Shona and I were on our way to Wanganui to do the Tylee Cottage, and we're back and forward to Auckland during that year. And one trip we stopped at the Brown Sugar Cafe in Taihape, And I signed, my old company name was Jeff Thomson Sculptor, and the woman behind the counter said, "Oh, you're Jeff Thomson, the sculptor?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "We'd love a big gumboot here." So I made of course the Taihape is Fred Dagg. Where would you be in Taihape without your gumboot?
Yeah.
So I did a drawing of a gumboot on a serviette and put my phone number and name and left it.
Really?
And it was probably 6 weeks later I got a phone call. So that's how that happened.
From the council?
No, from the back then there was the gumboot promotion, Taihape Gumboot Promotions business company.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it came
Wow.
from them. They commissioned the gumboot.
And I guess, New Zealanders, they really identify with you as an artist, and part of that is because of the way you make your work so accessible. But also that material of corrugated iron is a material that a lot of Kiwis connect to, especially slightly older Kiwis. And the fact that you've taken that material that we're also familiar with and taken it to another place. You are seen as an artist who people can really relate to, which is really what you had wanted from the beginning, isn't it?
I think probably early on it was. There's times when I haven't wanted that. But you are right. And I think what it is a lot of people would see corrugated if they've had any involvement in a tough, stubborn, harsh, you nail it on. It's difficult even just nailing it onto a roof. The nail bounces back and you need a pair of pliers to hold the nail, or you're going to bloody squash your finger, your thumb between a nail and the roof. It can be really nasty, but to see it be turned into something so different to what that
Was
how we
intended for.
know it.
Yeah.
Is I think that's what gets people's attention. So I've always a big part of my work has been probably quite unusual for an artist, but one of the things has been to try and all the time to try and find new ways of working visually to keep that story going.
Yeah, and you're definitely achieving that.
And I think when you're limited with a material, you've got to use your imagination.
And do you think as you get older, your practice will change?
It's already changing. I'm doing a lot more watercolour painting and printmaking, because I'm realising that I'm getting little bits of osteoarthritis, not a lot, but it is there. I'm upgrading equipment, just getting an air riveter. So I'm not, I try and vary the way I work. So I'm not cutting or doing the same thing all the time, which has worked beautifully. But I am getting on a bit now, and I'm starting to notice that if there's a sheet of iron at the bottom of 10 sheets, and that's the one I want, I'll go and have a cup of coffee or something, and procrastinate.
Well, that's where you need your little helpers, young students or something who can do that kind of lugging and running around for you. Yeah, I mean, you've got so many years left anyway. You're young, 67.
67.
So, Jeff, I feel like there's so many works that I really love to unpack and explore and talk to you about that you've made, which have had a big impact on me and no doubt many of our listeners. So we're just going to touch on a few, and perhaps we could touch on some that you'd like to talk about as well. But I really, really love Mesh, which is at Brick Bay, and that, could you explain what that is and how that came about?
Mesh is a sort of a colonial house structure with, it's a house you can walk inside, made of lots of different aluminium meshes, and it's predominantly painted red. It's really quite big. It's got a chimney and it's got a water tank and a water tank stand and steps, and it came about through always fossicking recycling centres, rubbish tips, getting materials, and of course I get a lot of meshes, and I've chopped them up and woven them. So it was an extension of that, and I've done a series of works, and I've got a show of the models of these little mesh houses that I've made coming up at the Kumio Art Centre in October. So, but it basically came from that, and I was asked if I could. The first one I made was a commission in Martinborough for the Parkins, for Chris Parkin, who's the Parkin drawing for their property up there, And that's where I first made a big structure using mesh. And I thought, gosh, it works so well, so I've explored it.
By mesh you mean a metal that's got
holes in it. Metals that got holes in it.
And different patterns.
Different patterns. And I also did one for Sculptor on the Gulf one year where it was like a big tunnel you walk through, and I'd been inspired by the pattern of the Pahutakawa trees, the dappled light, and also one of my favourite paintings, Pahutakawa Rena. There's two naked women on the water's edge under a Pahutakawa tree, and they're camouflaged. It's camouflaged with the dappled light all over their bodies. So I've always enjoyed that painting, and it's in the collection of the Christchurch Art Gallery. And that's the pattern that you get walking around on Sculptor on the Gulf, that walkway, the pattern of the Pahutakawas. And that's what led me to the idea of making a sculpture with perforations where you get light coming through and shadow, so that the spectator walking through became part of the artwork.
And I love the way the mesh in that house in particular, there's different sort of meshes behind meshes and with different patterns and different holes. And then that creates a whole other sort of perspective and pattern with the sort of repeated layers of mesh, which is so effective.
The pattern, you get big densities in dark areas, and then you get really light areas.
Yeah.
And the Miro pattern too, we get that optical illusion of when circles are put over circles and moved a little bit.
Yeah, it's really, really cool. And also I love I think it was a sculpture that you made for one of the sculpture shows, maybe Waiheke, that was using hay that looked like corrugated iron out of hay. Is that how you made it?
Yes, and it came about that was at the Connells Bay Sculpture Park. It was a haystack where I'd corrugated and made roofing products, ridge caps and downpipes and ridging out of hay and wire netting. That was inspired by the first thing I did on the chateau in France. I would arrive there, set up my machine, was in this 500-year-old farming shelter as a studio, and right there was this wire netting and a couple of bales of hay, and they wanted me to make a sculpture for the following week for a huge big, it was all over the south part of France, this big garden festival weekend. And that's what I made. I made this haystack in this beautiful paddock amongst all those romantic big round hay bales. Of course, it's different in France. It's romantic there.
Our ones are covered in plastic.
And going back to Monet's haystack anyway.
Yeah.
And the gals, Joe and John and friends of theirs, had been to see my work at the chateau on one of their trips, a trip to France to celebrate a birthday. That they'd gone to the chateau and seen the work there, as well as other things I'd made. And when the opportunity came to make something temporarily there, I thought of that haystack, so I remade it on a bigger scale.
Well, so effective. Really ingenious. Yeah. And would you like to talk about a couple of works in particular?
Look, one of my favourites, again, was Sculptor on the Gulf, was 2005, a work called Contour, where I went over there with my worker, Alan, and I thought I was supposed to be in Los Angeles for a show there, which never happened. It didn't happen. So at the last minute, I allowed 4 days to work at Waiheke, to be spontaneous and make something. And I was the last artist. I'd been selected for a drawing I'd made, but I was the last artist in the last hour of time that Jackie O'Brien, the curator, had said we had to have our sites all finalised. So I met her in this car park, and we walked about 50 metres, and there was this steep hill and the grass was about 2 metres deep, and I said, that's the site I want. And so I went there with my worker Alan. We took a roll former, and we took about 80 metres of brand new corrugated iron, which I'd ordered and had made. And we worked there for 4 days, curving the corrugated iron, joining each sheet to the next, and ran it down the hillside like a giant ribbon. And it did it. I would hit contours on it. It was so rugged, the land, and there was dips and things. So it sort of followed these patterns and ran down the hill. And it ended up being about 60 metres long.
Really?
It was, I probably had 100 metres to start off with. And by curving it all, it it was shrunk. And the locals nicknamed it the toilet paper roll. So
really?
it wasn't that popular, but it was one of my favourite. It was just so spontaneous, built on the spot, and I loved that way of doing it.
And that would have looked amazing from the sea.
Yes, Yes, it did. Yeah, and that was probably one of my favourite works. I always enjoyed the station wagon, the novelty of that, which wore off. Eventually, I did get sick of being stopped and looked at all the time. Of course, the front lawn had the same problem because they had an artificial grass on there. I think it was a Holden. They had a zip-on grass thing they put all over their car.
Really?
Yeah. So the Holden, the contour for Waiheke Sculpture on the Gulf, carpet where I made carpet with all the thousands of woven strips, which was just like an impressionist painting with all the little dots of colour. It was beautiful. Also, the project I'm doing at Westlake is I'm really enjoying that. And of course, probably the supreme one would have been my roofing project, where I did roofing. And I'm still hoping to go back to that.
Well, I really hope you can do that in Helensville. I think that would be incredible and a real sort of lasting legacy. You have all these commissions, people come to you, private and public. You know, a lot of work that you do, plus your own work that you're initiating. Are you actually represented by a gallery, and how do you manage that kind of dealer gallery aspect of your work?
I'm down to one dealer gallery, which I quite enjoy, and that's Bowen Galleries in Wellington with Jenny Nelligan. And I've been there. I went there originally with Paul Dibble and his then wife Trish. They had a joint ceramic show there, and I was staying with them in Palmerston North, and we went down to pick up the show, and I met Jenny Nelligan, and I did a show there way back in 1984 of mailboxes.
Oh, wow.
I've had numerous galleries over the years, Gal Langsford, Rodney Kirksmith, Campbell Grant in Christchurch, he retired. I got Gal Langsford, I got not kicked out, but left off the list for that one because I think I didn't earn enough money. I don't know. And the gallery in Germany, she retired. Ray Hughes in Sydney died. The gallery in France at the Chateau, they had a gallery there. That's still open, and I've sent them works from time to time. The German gallery, Anna Lee retired. And so, yeah, I'm down to one gallery.
And you're not in a big rush to get any more?
I keep thinking, for the exposure of doing your new work, people don't really see it. I do a lot of work in community galleries. There we go. I'm on the board and co-chair of our community art gallery in Helensville, which I thoroughly enjoy putting time back into the community. So, I'm really, it doesn't have that prestigious sort of dealer gallery status, but it's an opportunity to do new work, and I get it photographed because my brother, Rory, is a photographer, so he photographs everything. It's really good for proposals to have good quality photographs. And I do pay him, but it's really well worth it.
Yeah.
Take them yourself, but to have good quality makes all the difference.
Yeah. I mean, you have prestige as an artist, but you don't, it's almost like you don't need the dealer gallery to give you that, which is, I think, amazing. And I love the way that you're having a show at Kumu Arts, which is our local art gallery, and you're not pretentious about where you show, and in fact, you're almost the opposite of that. You want the community to be part of what you're doing. Some artists don't feel like that.
It's hard to put, well, I think I know the reason, but people like to get the attention. They like to be able to sell work. There's a lot of artists who wouldn't compromise like I do to make works, working with people, and that would make it a lot more difficult. So it could be the economics of it, surviving. If you're in a gallery selling work, you've got an automatic public coming who are often people who want to buy things, buy art, collect art. I am fortunate. I've got 3 or 4 books which have been published over the years on different projects or on my work and from touring shows and things. So they also bring in work.
And bring in money.
They bring in money. People see those and see things. But again, they'll see something and want something similar.
And it feels like you don't have any problem with that side of your practice, like the commissions. It's not difficult for you. You always seem to be having lots of projects on the go. So, you've built that up yourself in some ways. Yeah,
it's just through years and years of working, producing, making things. It's not easy. It hasn't been easy. I'm at a point now where I'd quite like to go back and do some shows in a dealer gallery. Just, Yeah. Someone the other day said to me that they hadn't seen my work around for a while, and they go to and I suddenly thought, gosh, it is good to have that work seen.
Yeah, it's sort of it's a balance, isn't it? It's hard to know sort of how much of each. Yeah, but you probably don't have time to get work for a dealer gallery.
I'd make time.
Yeah. So anyone out there who wants Jeff on the books?
Yeah. I've never actually really gone looking for a gallery, and I've always been asked, which over the years, but maybe the time has arrived where I need to go and do some asking myself. Yeah. And be prepared to be turned down as well.
Well, I don't think you would be somehow. And you and I play a very small part on a committee who are creating a commemorative sculpture for Muriwai after the cyclone that destroyed so many of our homes and people's lives. And you are a huge part of that. So can you tell us very quickly what sculpture you're planning to commemorate that moment?
It's been a great honour to be asked by locals, most of who actually did lose their houses. So I've done a number of designs, and the one that was unanimously decided upon was a series of sort of columns, organic columns. It's still being finalised. They're all going to be made using materials from Category 3 houses which are being demolished. So they've been getting permission or getting the go-ahead from homeowners, and not everyone has said yes, but a lot of are very excited the idea of parts of their houses. So I'm looking at everything from bricks, concrete blocks, weatherboards, decking, taps, pebbles on the outside, ground up concrete which I can reuse as concrete, and ceramics, tiles which are mostly in tones of neutral tones of whites and creams with a few blacks thrown in. So the columns will be made using these materials to it's not really a celebration, it's to commemorate, for people to come and look at, and those who lost houses to have something where they can come, because a lot of them have moved away from the area.
Yeah, and thank you so much for the work you're doing with that. I think on behalf of the Muriwai community, it's really important work, and it's going to be really quite a emotional event, I think, when that gets unveiled, because so many people have been affected. So that's amazing. Thank you. All right, well, let's get quickly on to the questions. What would you say to your younger artistic self, Jeff?
I would probably say now, I didn't go into KiwiSaver because I've always thought, look, I'm better off making sculptures and putting them aside, which I've done. But the way the market's up and down, I'd probably say make sure you start saving early if you can put money aside or put artwork aside. Yeah, artwork aside for the future. If it's going to be sellable, or you can actually, for a lot of us, it's not going to work out that way. But I would have put more artwork away earlier and kept them.
And what do you find the most challenging aspect of being an artist?
For me now, it's coming up with new ideas for work, because you get in this mindset of making things for people. So you've suddenly got to stop that and move into this other mindset where I see so many younger artists and older who are experimenting and doing fabulous works, and I sometimes feel I'm stuck in this time zone where I'm just doing this. It's not that much fun like making a three-dimensional corrugated iron giraffe or something, and I'm not referring, there's a big one up at the Gibbs farm I made, and at what we know as the .com mansion, the Mowbray mansion. I'm doing things like that and just thinking of the time being wasted when I could be doing other more interesting things.
And once again, I think I know the answer to this, but why do you make the kind of work you make?
With the animals, I run a business, so I have employees, and huge, believe it or not, huge costs. It's usually about $2,500 a week going out the door. So it certainly keeps me on my toes, and in a way that's good, because it means that I have to jump at opportunities. I don't just sit back and go drinking coffee in cafes or whatever. I'm forced to work under pressure often, and good things can come out of that, but it's not always fun.
And why do you think corrugated iron has been your main material of choice?
It just happened. I don't think too much about it. It just happened. And as I pointed out, I do lots of things with other materials, and I do a lot of painting. And it's often a thing, I'm often asked, or every so often someone says, you're still working with corrugated iron. I wonder how many painters get asked that. Are you still painting on canvas?
You're still using paint?
I think it's because it's a slightly offside material to work with. People working with bronze, which of course is very traditional, I don't know whether they get asked that question.
No, that's so true. Yeah. Interesting. But you do actually have quite a varied practice that people might not be so familiar with, your screen printing and the other things that you do, painting.
I've had to vary it to stay sane, I think, and to keep me interested. And that's why I keep trying to do new things so that I keep myself interested.
Yeah. Oh, well, we have both got a meeting that we need to go to. So thank you very much, Jeff, for being on the podcast. I think you're an absolute legend, and I'm very honoured and privileged to speak with you like this and to learn some of your little stories that, I didn't know about. So thank you very much, and I look forward to seeing the next episode of Jeff Thomson, the artist.
Thank you, Mandy. Hopefully the Muriwai sculpture.
Yes, absolutely. Can't wait to see that. Thank you so much.
Yep. Thank you.